Maya Chen had always been the type of person who drew attention wherever she went. At 28, she owned 3 successful restaurants in downtown Portland, drove a pristine white Tesla, and had a smile that could charm anyone into trying her experimental fusion dishes. But Maya also had enemies, and in the competitive world of high-end dining, those enemies were multiplying fast. The trouble started when Maya opened her 3rd restaurant, Sakura Spice, right across the street from Bellacorte, the Italian establishment owned by Vincent Romano. Vincent had ruled that particular block for 15 years, and he didn't appreciate the young woman who dared to steal his customers with her innovative Korean-Italian fusion menu. "She's destroying the neighborhood," Vincent complained to anyone who would listen. Real Italian food doesn't need kimchi mixed into the marinara sauce. But Maya's restaurant was packed every night while Vincent's dining room grew emptier. The food critics loved her bold combinations, and social media influencers couldn't get enough of her photogenic dishes. Maya was winning, and Vincent hated every minute of it. The rivalry extended beyond just Vincent. Sarah Martinez, who owned the upscale bakery 2 blocks away, felt threatened when Maya started offering desserts that combined traditional Korean rice cakes with French pastry techniques. The desserts were becoming more popular than Sarah's classic croissants and macarons. "She's trying to take over the entire food scene," Sarah told her assistant while watching another line of customers walk past her shop toward Maya's place. "Someone needs to put her in her place." Then there was James Morrison, the food blogger who had been the most influential voice in Portland's dining scene until Maya arrived. James had built his reputation by discovering hidden gems and making or breaking restaurants with his reviews. But Maya didn't need his approval. Her restaurants succeeded despite his lukewarm reviews, and that made James feel irrelevant. Maya knew about the tensions, but she tried to stay focused on her work. She spent most of her time perfecting new recipes, managing her staff, and planning the expansion of her small restaurant empire. She lived alone in a modern apartment downtown, just a 10-minute walk from her flagship restaurant. On a typical Tuesday evening in October, Maya closed Sakura Spice at 11 and walked home through the quiet streets. She had her phone pressed to her ear, talking to her supplier about a special shipment of Korean pears that would arrive Thursday morning. "Make sure they're perfectly ripe," she said, fishing her keys from her purse as she approached her apartment building. "I want to use them for the new autumn menu." Maya never made it inside. The next morning, her assistant manager, David Kim, arrived at Sakura Spice to find the restaurant still locked. Maya was always there before him, usually by 9 in the morning to prep for the lunch crowd. David called her phone several times, but it went straight to voicemail. "Maya, it's David. Where are you? We've got the Henderson party coming in at noon, and I need to know if you finished the special menu we talked about." By noon, David was worried enough to call Maya's apartment manager. The manager agreed to do a welfare check and found Maya's apartment empty. Her bed hadn't been slept in. Her car was missing from the parking garage, and her purse was nowhere to be found. David called the police. Detective Lisa Park arrived at the restaurant that afternoon to take statements from Maya's employees. David explained that Maya never missed work without calling, and she certainly wouldn't abandon the Henderson party, which included several food critics and potential investors. "She was excited about this lunch," David insisted. "Maya's been planning the menu for 2 weeks. She wouldn't just disappear." The detective asked about Maya's personal life, her relationships, anyone who might want to hurt her. David mentioned the rivalry with Vincent Romano, but he was careful to say he didn't think Vincent would actually do anything dangerous. "It's just business competition," David said. "Vincent's old school, but he's not violent." Detective Park wasn't so sure. She had seen plenty of cases where business disputes turned personal, especially when someone's livelihood was threatened. She decided to pay Vincent a visit. Vincent was in his restaurant kitchen when Detective Park arrived, shouting at his sous chef about the quality of the tomatoes in the marinara sauce. When he saw the detective, his face went red with anger. "If this is about that woman across the street, I told everyone already. I had nothing to do with whatever happened to her. Mr. Romano, I haven't accused you of anything. I'm just trying to understand the nature of your relationship with Miss Chen." "Relationship?" Vincent laughed bitterly. "We don't have a relationship. She opened that place to spite me, stole my customers with her weird fusion garbage, and now she's probably running some publicity stunt to get more attention. Detective Park raised an eyebrow. You think Miss Chen staged her own disappearance? I wouldn't put it past her. The woman's obsessed with being in the spotlight. Maybe she figured disappearing for a few days would get her on the news, make people feel sorry for her, bring more customers. But Detective Park had already checked Maya's credit cards and bank accounts. No activity since Monday night. Her phone had gone dark around 11:15, just a few blocks from her apartment. Maya's Tesla was found Thursday morning in a parking lot near the waterfront, wiped clean of fingerprints. The news broke Friday morning. Local restaurant owner missing. Police investigate possible abduction. The story spread quickly through Portland's food community. And then, to social media. Number Find Maya began trending on Twitter. Vincent Romano was furious when he saw the news coverage. 3 television news vans were parked outside Sakura Spice, and reporters were interviewing crying employees. Meanwhile, his restaurant remained empty except for the usual handful of longtime customers. This is exactly what I predicted, he told his wife. She's turned her disappearance into a marketing campaign. But as the days passed and Maya remained missing, even Vincent began to wonder if something serious had happened to her. The police were asking more questions, searching the waterfront, bringing in cadaver dogs. This didn't look like a publicity stunt anymore. Sarah Martinez was also growing concerned. She had disliked Maya's success, but she never wanted anything bad to happen to the young woman. Sarah found herself walking past Maya's apartment building, looking up at the dark windows, wondering where Maya could be. I hope she's okay, Sarah told her assistant. Competition is one thing, but this is different. James Morrison, the food blogger, was having similar thoughts. He had written some harsh reviews of Maya's restaurants, questioning whether her fusion concept was authentic or just a gimmick to attract attention. But now, he felt guilty about his criticism. What if his negative coverage had contributed to Maya's problems somehow? The investigation continued for 2 weeks with no leads. Detective Park interviewed dozens of people, checked security cameras, and followed up on tips from the public. Nothing pointed to a clear suspect or motive. Maya's family flew in from California. Her parents, both Korean immigrants who had built their own successful restaurant in Los Angeles, were devastated. They set up a command center at Sakura Spice, coordinating with volunteers who were distributing flyers and searching the surrounding neighborhoods. Maya is strong, her mother told the news cameras. If someone took her, she will find a way to come home. We just have to keep looking. The Portland food community rallied around the missing restaurateur. Even her competitors organized a fundraiser to help pay for the search efforts. Vincent Romano surprised everyone by donating $5,000 to the reward fund. I didn't like her business practices, he said stiffly when a reporter asked about his donation. But nobody deserves what happened to her. 3 weeks after Maya's disappearance, the story was still making headlines. But the leads had dried up. Detective Park was running out of options when she got a call that would change everything. Detective, this is Officer Martinez with Portland Parks. We've got a situation at Laurelhurst Park. You need to see this. Detective Park arrived at the park to find a crowd gathered around the duck pond. Officer Martinez led her through the spectators to where a maintenance worker was standing next to a large black garbage bag that had been floating near the shore. We pulled it out about an hour ago, the maintenance worker explained. Soon as we opened it, we knew we had to call you guys. Inside the bag were Maya's clothes, including the distinctive red jacket she had been wearing the night she disappeared. The clothes were clean but had been underwater for a while. There was also Maya's phone, completely destroyed by water damage, and her wallet with all her credit cards still inside. But there was something else in the bag that made Detective Park's blood run cold. A handwritten note, sealed in a plastic bag to protect it from the water. The note was written in block letters on ordinary notebook paper. She thought she was so smart. She thought she could take whatever she wanted. Now she knows better. The others will learn too. Detective Park read the note 3 times before calling for the crime scene unit. The message suggested that Maya's disappearance wasn't random, and more importantly, it implied that other people might be in danger. The others will learn too. What others? Maya's family? Her employees? Her business rivals? That evening, Detective Park called Vincent Romano, Sarah Martinez, and James Morrison. She didn't tell them about the note, but she warned each of them to be careful and to report anything suspicious. "I can't give you details about the investigation," she told them, "but we have reason to believe that Miss Chen was targeted specifically, and there's a possibility that other people in the food industry might be at risk." Vincent was skeptical. "You think this is some kind of serial killer targeting restaurant owners? I think we need to take every precaution until we know more." That night, Vincent double-checked the locks on his restaurant and his home. Sarah Martinez decided to stay with her sister instead of going home to her empty apartment. James Morrison, who lived alone, made sure his security system was activated and kept his phone within reach. None of them slept well. The discovery of Maya's belongings made the national news. The mystery of the missing restaurateur had captured public attention, and the ominous note suggested that the story was far from over. Detective Park worked late into the night, studying the note and trying to understand what the perpetrator meant by the others. She had a growing suspicion that Maya Chen's disappearance was just the beginning of something much worse, but she had no idea how right she was, or how quickly events would spiral beyond anyone's control. In a small cabin 40 miles outside Portland, Maya Chen was very much alive. She sat in front of a laptop computer, scrolling through news articles about her own disappearance. The headlines brought a satisfied smile to her face. "Perfect," she whispered to herself. "They're all exactly where I want them." Maya had spent months planning every detail of her disappearance. The note in the bag was just the first move in a much larger game. She had enemies who thought they could destroy her career, her reputation, and her dreams. Now it was time to show them what real destruction looked like. She opened a new browser window and began typing an email to a contact she had found through very careful research. Someone who could help her with the next phase of her plan. Someone who understood that some problems required permanent solutions. Maya looked at the clock. It was almost midnight. In a few hours, she would make her first move against the people who had tried to ruin her life. They thought she was gone. Thought they were safe. They were about to learn how wrong they were. James Morrison was having trouble sleeping. Ever since Detective Park's warning about being careful, he found himself jumping at every sound in his apartment. The old building creaked and settled throughout the night, and each noise made him wonder if someone was trying to break in. It didn't help that his latest blog post about Maya's disappearance had attracted some angry comments. Most people were supportive, sharing their own theories about what might have happened to the missing restaurateur. But a few messages were darker, suggesting that James deserved whatever might happen to him for writing negative reviews about Maya's restaurants. "You tore her down when she was trying to build something beautiful," one comment read. "Maybe you should experience what it feels like to lose everything." James had reported the threatening comments to the police, but Detective Park told him that angry internet trolls were unfortunately common in high-profile missing person cases. People got emotionally invested in these stories, and sometimes they lashed out at anyone they perceived as connected to the victim's problems. Still, James couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. When he walked to his favorite coffee shop on Thursday morning, he noticed the same dark sedan that had been parked across from his apartment building. When he stopped to buy groceries, he saw a woman in sunglasses who seemed to be following him through the store aisles. "You're being paranoid," he told himself. But James had built his career on observing details, and his instincts were usually reliable. Friday morning brought news that made James's anxiety spike even higher. Vincent Romano hadn't shown up to open his restaurant. Bellacorti's assistant chef, Tony Ricci, had arrived at 6 in the morning to prep for the day's service, but Vincent was nowhere to be found. The restaurant owner was notorious for his strict schedule. He arrived every morning at 5:30, reviewed the previous day's numbers, and personally inspected every ingredient that would be used in the day's menu. "Vincent never misses a morning," Tony told Detective Park when she arrived at the restaurant. "Even when he had the flu last winter, he dragged himself in here to make sure everything was running properly." Detective Park felt a chill as she listened to Tony's description. Maya's disappearance had started the same way. A missing person who never deviated from their routine. "When did you last speak with Mr. Romano?" "Yesterday evening, around 9 o'clock. He called to confirm the delivery schedule for today's fish shipment. Detective Park immediately dispatched officers to Vincent's apartment. They found his door unlocked, which was unusual for a man who had been nervous about his safety ever since Maya's disappearance. Vincent's bed hadn't been slept in, and his car was missing from the building's parking garage. But unlike Maya's apartment, Vincent's place showed signs of a struggle. A lamp was knocked over in the living room, and there were scratches on the hardwood floor suggesting that furniture had been moved suddenly. Most disturbing of all, there were small spots of blood on the carpet near the front door. "This is different from the Chen case," Detective Park told her partner, Detective Rodriguez. Maya's disappearance looked planned, almost voluntary. This looks like Vincent was taken against his will. However, the crime scene team processed Vincent's apartment while Detective Park interviewed his neighbors. Mrs. Patterson, who lived next door, said she had heard raised voices around 11 o'clock the night before. "It sounded like Vincent was arguing with someone," she said. "I heard him say something like, 'You can't be serious,' and then there was a loud crash. I thought about calling the police, but Vincent gets upset about business sometimes. I figured it would pass." Mrs. Patterson couldn't identify the other voice, but she was certain Vincent hadn't been alone. "Definitely two people talking, maybe three. I heard footsteps in the hallway afterward, but I didn't look out to see who it was. I mind my own business." The investigation into Vincent's disappearance moved quickly. Detective Park coordinated with patrol units to search for his car, a blue BMW sedan, while the forensics team analyzed the blood evidence from his apartment. By evening, they had preliminary results that confirmed Detective Park's worst fears. The blood was definitely Vincent's, based on samples taken from his bathroom razor. The quantity suggested he had been injured but probably not killed in the apartment. Most likely, someone had hurt him enough to subdue him, then taken him elsewhere. "We're dealing with an escalation," Detective Park told her captain. Maya Chen's disappearance looked like an abduction, but it was clean, professional. Vincent Romano's disappearance is violent, messy. Either we have a different perpetrator, or the same person is getting more aggressive. The news about Vincent's disappearance spread through Portland's food community like wildfire. Two prominent restaurateurs missing within a month was unprecedented. And people were scared. Sarah Martinez was terrified. She closed her bakery early Friday evening and drove straight to her sister's house in the suburbs. She didn't want to spend another night alone in her apartment downtown, especially with two of her business rivals already missing. "This can't be a coincidence," Sarah told her sister Elena over dinner. "Someone is targeting restaurant owners, and Maya and Vincent are just the beginning." Elena tried to reassure her. "Sarah, you're probably overthinking this. Maybe Vincent just had some kind of breakdown after Maya disappeared. The stress of the investigation, the media attention, the impact on his business, it could have pushed him over the edge." But Sarah wasn't convinced. She had received two strange phone calls that week, both from numbers she didn't recognize. When she answered, the caller hung up without saying anything. At the time, she had assumed they were wrong numbers or telemarketers. Now she wondered if someone had been checking to see if she was home. James Morrison was having similar thoughts. After hearing about Vincent's disappearance, he called Detective Park to report the suspicious activity he had noticed around his apartment. "I think someone's been following me," he told the detective. "I know it sounds paranoid, but there's a pattern. Same cars, same people, showing up wherever I go." Detective Park took his concerns seriously. 2 missing persons in a month was already unusual. If someone was now stalking other members of the food community, the situation was escalating rapidly. "Mr. Morrison, I want you to stay somewhere else tonight. Do you have friends or family you can visit?" Creator. James did. His brother lived across town with his wife and 2 young children. James packed a bag and drove to their house, checking his rearview mirror constantly to see if anyone was following him. "You're welcome to stay as long as you need," his brother said. "But are you sure you're not overreacting? This whole thing with Maya and Vincent has everyone on edge." James wasn't sure of anything anymore. But he felt safer surrounded by his brother's family than he did alone in his apartment. Saturday morning brought another development that sent shockwaves through the investigation. Vincent's BMW was found in the parking lot of a shopping center, 15 miles outside Portland. Like Maya's Tesla, it had been wiped clean of fingerprints. But this time, the perpetrator had left more than just cleaned surfaces. Tucked under the windshield wiper was another note, written in the same block letters as the message found with Maya's belongings. He thought he could destroy dreams without consequences. He was wrong. The lesson continues. Detective Park studied the new note carefully. The language was similar to the first message. Someone who felt wronged, someone seeking revenge against people they believed had hurt them. But the tone was more confident now, almost boastful. The lesson continues. That suggested more disappearances were planned. Detective Park immediately called Sarah Martinez and James Morrison to warn them. Sarah was already staying with her sister, but James was planning to return to his apartment that evening. "Don't go home," Detective Park told him firmly. "Stay with your brother until we catch whoever is doing this." "Detective, do you really think I'm in danger? I mean, I'm just a food blogger." Vincent and Maya were direct competitors, but I'm not really part of their world. Detective Park had been wondering the same thing. What connected Maya Chen, Vincent Romano, and potentially James Morrison? They were all part of Portland's food scene. But beyond that, the connection wasn't obvious. Then she remembered something David Kim had mentioned during his initial interview. Maya had been upset about a negative review that James Morrison had written about Sakura Spice, calling her fusion concept inauthentic and style over substance. Vincent had been Maya's most vocal critic, constantly complaining that her restaurant was destroying the neighborhood's culinary integrity. Sarah Martinez had publicly criticized Maya's dessert menu, telling a local newspaper that tradition and innovation need to be balanced, not thrown together recklessly. Detective Park felt the pieces clicking into place. Someone was targeting people who had criticized Maya Chen. But if Maya was truly missing or dead, who was seeking revenge on her behalf? She spent Saturday evening reviewing every detail of both cases, looking for clues she might have missed. The perpetrator was organized enough to plan elaborate abductions, smart enough to avoid leaving physical evidence, and motivated enough to risk escalating from property crimes to violence. But they were also making mistakes. The notes were unnecessarily risky. Leaving Vincent's car where it could be easily found suggested overconfidence. And targeting multiple victims in a short time frame was drawing intense police attention. Sunday morning, Detective Park got the call she had been dreading. "Detective, this is Officer Chen with Lake Oswego Police. We've got a missing person case that might be connected to your investigation. Sarah Martinez, age 34, owns a bakery in Portland. Her sister called this morning when Sarah didn't show up for their planned brunch." Detective Park drove to Sarah's sister's house in Lake Oswego, a quiet suburb south of Portland. Elena Martinez was waiting on the front porch, pacing nervously. "Sarah was supposed to be here at 10 o'clock, Elena explained. "We planned to go shopping and then have lunch. Sarah's never late for anything, especially not family time." Elena led Detective Park to the guest bedroom, where Sarah had been staying. The bed was unmade, and Sarah's suitcase was still packed with clothes. Her car keys were missing from the kitchen counter where she had left them the night before. "What time did you last see your sister?" "Around 11 last night. Sarah said she was tired and wanted to get some sleep. I checked on her around midnight when I went to bed, and she was already asleep." Detective Park examined the guest room carefully. Unlike Vincent's apartment, there were no signs of struggle. The window was locked from the inside, and nothing seemed disturbed. "Did you hear anything unusual during the night? Cars in the driveway, voices, doors opening or closing?" Elena shook her head. "I'm a heavy sleeper. Once I take my medication, I don't wake up until morning." Detective Park asked about the medication. Elena took prescription sleep aids for chronic insomnia, which meant she wouldn't have heard anything short of a fire alarm. "Is it possible Sarah left voluntarily? Maybe she was too scared to stay and decided to go somewhere else without telling you?" "No way," Elena said firmly. "Sarah was scared, but she wouldn't just disappear without calling. She knows I worry about her." Detective Park checked Sarah's car and found it missing from Elena's garage. A neighbor reported seeing headlights in the driveway around 2 in the morning, but he had assumed it was Elena leaving for an early shift at the hospital where she worked. The investigation team processed Elena's house for evidence, while Detective Park coordinated the search for Sarah's car. A red Honda Civic. She had a sinking feeling that they would find it abandoned somewhere, cleaned of evidence, with another cryptic note from the perpetrator. James Morrison was horrified when Detective Park called to tell him about Sarah's disappearance. 3 people, he said, his voice shaking. 3 people in less than 6 weeks. Detective, I can't go back to my normal life knowing someone might be coming for me next. Mr. Morrison, we're going to catch whoever is doing this. But until we do, I need you to stay alert and stay away from your usual routines. James had already decided to take a leave of absence from his blog and stay with his brother indefinitely. He was too frightened to continue his normal activities, and his brother's family was understanding about the situation. Maybe you should consider leaving town for a while, his brother suggested. Take a vacation somewhere until the police solve this case. It wasn't a bad idea. James had some money saved, and he could work on his blog from anywhere with internet access. But running away felt like giving up, and James wasn't ready to let some anonymous psychopath control his life completely. That evening, Detective Park received the call she had expected. Sarah's Honda Civic had been found in the parking lot of a grocery store in Beaverton, another Portland suburb. Like the previous vehicles, it had been cleaned thoroughly, and like before, there was a note under the windshield wiper. She spread poison about someone who deserved better. She learned the price of cruelty. One more lesson remains. Detective Park read the message 3 times, feeling a chill run down her spine. One more lesson remains. The perpetrator was planning one more abduction, and based on the pattern so far, James Morrison was the obvious target, but something about the latest note bothered her. The language was becoming more emotional, more personal. Someone who deserved better suggested a close relationship with Maya Chen, and the phrase spread poison implied that the perpetrator saw the victim's criticism of Maya as particularly harmful. Detective Park called the FBI to request assistance with the case. 3 connected abductions with evidence of planning and escalation met the criteria for federal involvement. She needed more resources and expertise to catch this person before they completed their lesson. As she drove home that night, Detective Park couldn't shake the feeling that she was missing something important about the case. The perpetrator seemed to know details about Maya's critics that weren't public knowledge. They knew where the victims lived, what their routines were, how to approach them without being seen. This wasn't a stranger targeting random people. This was someone with inside access to Portland's food community. Someone who knew these people personally. But who could that be? And why were they so invested in avenging Maya Chen's reputation? Detective Park made a note to dig deeper into Maya's personal relationships, her employees, her family members. Someone close to Maya was behind these disappearances, and they weren't finished yet. In her cabin outside Portland, Maya Chen read the latest news coverage with satisfaction. The police were asking the right questions now, but they were still several steps behind. She had planned every detail carefully, and her anonymous accomplice was executing the plan perfectly. Maya looked at the final name on her list. James Morrison. The food blogger who had damaged her reputation with his snide reviews, who had questioned her authenticity and creativity. James would be the most careful target, now that he knew he was in danger, but Maya was patient. She had waited this long for justice, and she could wait a little longer to complete her revenge. James Morrison would pay for his cruel words, just like the others. Then Maya Chen could finally return to her life, free of the people who had tried to destroy her dreams. The lessons were almost complete. James Morrison's paranoia turned out to be justified. On Monday morning, he found a manila envelope slipped under the door of his brother's house. Inside was a single photograph, a picture of James sitting at his computer, taken through the window of his apartment. He was clearly visible, completely unaware that someone was watching him from outside. On the back of the photo, written in the same block letters as the previous notes, was a message: "You can run, but you cannot hide." The final lesson is coming. James called Detective Park immediately, his hands shaking as he held the phone. "They found me," he said. "Whoever is doing this knows where I'm staying. They took a picture of me at my apartment, but they delivered it here." Detective Park felt her stomach drop. If the perpetrator could track James to his brother's house, nowhere was safe. This person had resources, patience, and a level of surveillance capability that suggested professional training or assistance. "Mr. Morrison, we're moving you to a safe house today. Pack only what you absolutely need." Within 2 hours, James was relocated to a secure facility run by the U.S. Marshals Service. The location was kept secret from everyone, except Detective Park and the FBI agents now assigned to the case. But even as James was being moved to safety, Detective Park was realizing that the case was more complex than she had initially understood. The forensic analysis of the notes had revealed something disturbing. The handwriting analysis suggested they were written by 2 different people. The first note, found with Maya's belongings, shows consistent pressure and letter formation, the handwriting expert explained. But the subsequent notes show slight variations in style. Either one person is deliberately trying to disguise their writing, or we have 2 perpetrators working together. Detective Park studied the analysis reports. 2 people would explain how the abductions were executed so smoothly. One person to plan and coordinate, another to carry out the physical aspects of the crimes. But who would work together to target Maya's critics? And why were they so invested in this revenge? FBI agent Maria Santos, who had taken over as lead investigator, had her own theory. "I think Maya Chen is alive and orchestrating these abductions herself," Agent Santos told Detective Park. "Think about it. Who else would know exactly which people criticized her? Who else would have the motivation to target these specific individuals? But we found her belongings, her car. The evidence suggests she was abducted too. Evidence can be staged. Maya Chen is a smart woman who built a successful business. She would know how to fake her own abduction and then disappear long enough to carry out revenge against her enemies." Agent Santos had compelling evidence for her theory. Financial records showed that Maya had withdrawn $15,000 in cash from her business accounts in the weeks before her disappearance. Security camera footage from various locations around Portland showed Maya meeting with several unknown individuals in the month before she vanished. She was recruiting help, Agent Santos concluded. Maya found someone willing to assist with the abductions, probably for money. Detective Park wasn't entirely convinced. If Maya is alive and behind this, why hasn't anyone seen her? Portland isn't that big a city. Someone would have recognized her by now. She's probably staying outside the city, somewhere remote enough to avoid detection. Maybe she changed her appearance, dyed her hair, lost weight. 3 months is enough time to alter your appearance significantly. The investigation team began focusing their search on rural properties within a 50-mile radius of Portland. They looked for recent rental agreements, cash purchases, any property that could serve as a hideout for someone orchestrating a complex revenge plot. Meanwhile, James Morrison was struggling with life in protective custody. The safe house was comfortable but isolating. He couldn't work on his blog, couldn't contact friends or family except through supervised phone calls, couldn't even go outside without an armed escort. "How long do I have to live like this?" James asked Agent Santos during one of her visits to the safe house. "Until we catch the people responsible for these crimes. It could be days, weeks, or months. We're doing everything we can to expedite the investigation." James was getting restless and frightened. The psychological pressure of knowing someone wanted to hurt him, combined with the isolation of protective custody, was wearing down his mental health. What if you never catch them? What if I have to spend the rest of my life hiding from some psychopath who thinks I ruined their favorite restaurant? Agent Santos tried to reassure him. But privately she was asking herself the same questions. The perpetrators were careful, organized, and seemed to anticipate the investigation's moves. They had stayed one step ahead of law enforcement for months. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. David Kim, Maya's assistant manager, called Detective Park with information he said he should have shared weeks earlier. "I didn't think it was important at first," David explained. But Maya had been acting strange in the weeks before she disappeared. She was asking questions about Vincent Romano's schedule, about Sarah Martinez's routine, about where James Morrison lived. What kind of questions? Specific things, like what time Vincent usually left his restaurant, whether Sarah lived alone, whether James had a security system in his apartment. At the time, I thought Maya was just being competitive, keeping track of the other players in the local food scene. Detective Park felt a surge of excitement. This was the first direct evidence linking Maya to surveillance of her eventual victims. David, did Maya ask you to gather this information, or did you volunteer it? She asked me directly. Maya said she was thinking about writing a guide to Portland's food scene and needed background information about other restaurant owners. She seemed particularly interested in their personal lives, their habits, their security arrangements. Did you provide this information? David hesitated before answering. Some of it. I knew Vincent's schedule because our restaurants are across the street from each other. I had heard rumors about Sarah living alone. But I didn't know anything about James Morrison's apartment security. How did Maya react when you couldn't provide the information she wanted? She said she would find other sources. Maya was determined when she wanted something. She always found a way to get what she needed. Detective Park shared David's information with Agent Santos, and together they developed a new timeline for the case. Maya had been planning her revenge for at least 6 weeks before her staged disappearance. She had systematically gathered intelligence on her targets and recruited assistants for the physical aspects of the abductions. Now we just need to find where she's hiding and who she's working with, Agent Santos said. The answer to both questions came from an analysis of Maya's phone records. In the weeks before her disappearance, Maya had exchanged dozens of text messages with a number registered to Marcus Wheeler, a man with a criminal history, including assault, burglary, and fraud. Marcus had been released from prison 8 months earlier, after serving a 3-year sentence for armed robbery. He was struggling to find legitimate employment and had been living in a motel near the Portland airport. Perfect recruiting target for someone like Maya, Agent Santos observed. Desperate for money, comfortable with violence, and experienced in avoiding law enforcement. The FBI obtained warrants to search Marcus's motel room and monitor his communications. They discovered that Marcus had rented a cabin in the Cascade Mountains under a false name, paying 6 months' rent in advance with cash. Agent Santos assembled a tactical team to raid the cabin. If Maya and Marcus were there, and if the missing victims were being held at the location, the operation would need to be executed carefully to avoid harm to hostages. The cabin was located 43 miles east of Portland, accessible only by a narrow gravel road that wound through dense forest. Agent Santos positioned surveillance teams on the road to prevent escape while the tactical team approached the building. Through binoculars, they could see lights inside the cabin and 2 vehicles parked nearby. A pickup truck registered to Marcus Wheeler and a silver sedan with license plates that had been stolen from a car in Vancouver, Washington. We have movement inside, reported the surveillance team leader. At least 2 people, possibly more. Agent Santos gave the order to move in. The tactical team surrounded the cabin and announced their presence with loudspeakers. FBI, the building is surrounded. Come out with your hands visible. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the front door opened slowly, and a man matching Marcus Wheeler's description stepped onto the porch with his hands raised. Don't shoot, Marcus called out. I'm not armed. Is anyone else in the building? Agent Santos demanded through the loudspeaker. Just me and Maya. We're not going to resist. A few seconds later, Maya Chen appeared in the doorway. She looked different from her photos. Her hair was shorter and darker. She had lost weight, and she wore glasses she didn't need before. But it was definitely Maya. Agent Santos felt a surge of satisfaction as Marcus and Maya were taken into custody. But the most important question remained unanswered. Where were Vincent Romano, Sarah Martinez, and potentially other victims? Where are the people you abducted? Agent Santos asked Maya during the initial interrogation. Maya smiled coldly but didn't respond. Marcus was more cooperative, especially when Agent Santos explained that he could face kidnapping charges carrying life sentences. They're alive, Marcus said finally. Maya didn't want to kill anybody. She just wanted to scare them, to make them understand what it felt like to lose everything. Where are they? Marcus, there's a storage facility about 10 miles from here. Maya rented 3 units. Each person is in a separate unit, with food, water, and basic necessities. Maya said she planned to let them go after she proved her point. Agent Santos immediately dispatched teams to the storage facility Marcus described. The facility was small and isolated, perfect for holding people without being discovered. They found Vincent Romano in Unit 17, weak but alive after weeks of captivity. Sarah Martinez was in Unit 19, frightened but unharmed. Both victims had been provided with basic food and water, but they were traumatized by their ordeal. "She's completely insane," Vincent told the FBI agents who rescued him. Maya kept visiting me, talking about how I had tried to destroy her dreams, how I deserved to suffer for my cruelty. She seemed to think I was the villain in some kind of story. Sarah had a similar account. Maya said I was jealous of her success, that my criticism came from my own failure. She wanted me to apologize for questioning her dessert menu, to admit that I was wrong about her food. Both victims required medical attention and psychological counseling, but they would recover from their physical ordeal. The emotional trauma would take longer to heal. James Morrison was released from protective custody and reunited with his family. He was relieved that the threat was over, but he struggled with the knowledge that his restaurant reviews had triggered such an extreme response. "I wrote honestly about what I tasted," James told reporters. "I never meant to hurt anyone personally. Restaurant criticism is supposed to be about food, not about destroying people's lives." Maya's trial became a media sensation. The prosecution painted her as a narcissistic entrepreneur who couldn't handle legitimate business criticism. The defense argued that Maya had suffered a psychological breakdown under the pressure of running multiple restaurants and dealing with constant public scrutiny. During her testimony, Maya showed no remorse for her actions. "These people tried to destroy everything I worked for," Maya said from the witness stand. "Vincent Romano spread lies about my restaurant, trying to turn customers against me. Sarah Martinez publicly questioned my creativity and authenticity. James Morrison wrote reviews that damaged my reputation. Miss Chen, don't you understand that restaurant critics and competitors have the right to express their opinions? They have the right to be fair and honest. But they were cruel and malicious. They wanted to see me fail, and they used their positions to hurt me deliberately." The jury deliberated for 3 days before reaching their verdict. Maya was convicted on 3 counts of kidnapping, conspiracy, and numerous other charges. She was sentenced to 25 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 15 years. Marcus Wheeler pleaded guilty to his role in the abductions and received a 10-year sentence in exchange for his cooperation with the investigation. Vincent Romano eventually reopened Bella Corte, but he struggled to attract customers after the trauma of his kidnapping became public knowledge. Many people in Portland associated his restaurant with the disturbing case, and business never fully recovered. Sarah Martinez closed her bakery and moved to Seattle to start over. She said she couldn't bear to stay in Portland after everything that had happened. James Morrison continued writing his food blog, but he changed his approach significantly. His reviews became more constructive and less critical, focusing on helping restaurants improve rather than highlighting their flaws. "This experience taught me that words have power," James wrote in a blog post about the case. "When we criticize someone's work, we're affecting real people with real dreams. That doesn't mean we should be dishonest, but we can be more thoughtful about how we express our opinions." Detective Park returned to her regular caseload, but the Maya Chen case stayed with her. She had learned important lessons about the dangers of obsession and the unexpected ways that business disputes could escalate into violence. "People think restaurant criticism is harmless because it's about food," Detective Park told a colleague. "But for someone like Maya Chen, who had invested her entire identity in her restaurants, those criticisms felt like personal attacks. When you combine that kind of emotional investment with certain personality traits, you can get a very dangerous situation." The Portland food scene slowly recovered from the trauma of the abductions. But the case changed how people thought about business competition and public criticism. Restaurant owners became more careful about their public statements regarding competitors, and food critics tried to be more constructive in their reviews. Maya Chen's restaurants were eventually sold to new owners, who changed the names and menus completely. The Sakura Spice location became a traditional sushi restaurant with no fusion elements. The new owners wanted to distance themselves completely from Maya's legacy. In prison, Maya spent her time writing what she claimed would be a tell-all book about her experience. She maintained that she had been justified in her actions, and that her critics had deserved what happened to them. "I built something beautiful, and they tried to tear it down," Maya wrote in a letter to a journalist. If they had been honest and fair in their criticism, none of this would have happened. They brought this on themselves. But few people were interested in Maya's version of events. The public saw her as a dangerous individual who had lost touch with reality, not as a victim of unfair criticism. The cabin where Maya and Marcus had hidden was eventually demolished by the property owner, who said he couldn't stand having the building associated with the case. The storage facility where the victims were held was converted to a different use after the owner received too many requests from curiosity seekers wanting to see the units. Years later, the Maya Chen case was still studied by law enforcement agencies as an example of how business disputes could escalate into serious violent crimes. The case highlighted the importance of taking threats seriously, even when they seemed to come from successful, educated individuals who didn't fit the typical profile of violent criminals. Vincent Romano, Sarah Martinez, and James Morrison all eventually rebuilt their lives, though they carried emotional scars from their ordeal. They had learned that success and public visibility could attract dangerous attention from unstable individuals, and they all took security more seriously in their personal and professional lives. The case served as a reminder that in an era of social media and instant communication, criticism and competition could have unpredictable and devastating consequences when directed at the wrong person. Maya Chen's restaurants had been successful. Her food had been innovative, and her business acumen had been impressive. But none of that justified what she had done to the people who dared to criticize her work. In the end, Maya Chen's quest for revenge had destroyed everything she had worked to build. Her restaurants were gone, her reputation was ruined, and she would spend the best years of her life in prison. The people she had tried to silence had survived and continued their careers, while Maya herself had become a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked ambition and wounded pride. The Portland food scene moved on, but it was forever changed by the knowledge that sometimes the person serving your dinner might be capable of much more than just cooking.